your lease agreement. I have these notes here because I will be talking a lot about different parts of the lease agreement and I don't want to forget about anything. So I have my notes here with our new logo. Guys, we are rebranding, as you know. So let me know how you like it. And let's go into the topic right away. Before I give you the 3 most important parts of the lease agreement, I want to mention one thing, and that is that you should always have a lease agreement. Because I've seen this recently, I don't know, more and more often. I don't know why, if something happened or it just people contacting me more or whatever, but I've received a couple messages in the last couple of days where people were telling me, hey, I don't have a lease agreement. How do I prove my address to the Ministry of the Interior when I extend in my residence permit? Or kind of variations of the same thing. And the thing is, you don't. So if you don't have a lease agreement, you don't have any rights. You know, even if you have lease agreement, if you have a bad landlord, it can still like be difficult. But if you don't have a lease agreement at all, you can get into serious trouble because they can kick you out anytime. You have no proof that you are legally living in the apartment. They can keep your deposit, they can keep your things if they want to, because there is no like proof of anything. Especially if you pay them cash, then you're just like waiting for a problem to happen. Because let's be honest, if a landlord tells you they don't want to give you a lease agreement, that's already shady and there is something sketchy going on there. So number 1, before we even go into the details of what the lease agreement should or should not include, is that you must have a lease agreement. Guys, I understand the situation on the market and you are desperate and everything's expensive, like the rentals and all that. But if you don't have a lease agreement, you're like screwed. You don't have anything to prove to anyone, any authorities, Ministry of the Interior, any other official authorities, and you don't really have any safety, any security. Just don't do that. Don't move into an apartment where you don't have a lease agreement. I'll end it there. I could talk about it for hours, but let's stop there. And let's go through the actual topic of today. So, number 1, what you should always check is if the flat is actually a flat. I've talked about it in other videos as well, but the thing is that in the Czech Republic, I'm not sure if it's the same in all the countries, so I'll explain as for like little kids. Okay, bear with me. So in the Czech Republic, there is a database of all the properties at the territory of the Czech Republic. Everything must be there, and then everything must be approved before it's built or after it's built. It's inspected, and then it's like the state is put into this governmental database. We call it katastr nemovitostí, like the cadastre, or like property, I don't know how to call it in English, but cadastre, land register. And all the properties of all the various types, flats, offices, other spaces like land, fields, everything is mentioned there. Let me switch the chat to English. Okay, so everything is there. So everyone, and it's a publicly accessible thing, database, so everyone can go and check any actually property or apartment or whatever. So you definitely should do that, and you should make sure that the flat where you live in is actually listed as a flat. Because it might sound stupid, but sometimes apartments that look as apartments, so you go there, you go see the place, it has a kitchen, it has everything, but officially it's not listed as an apartment. It can have various different reasons, but the main point is that when you go to the cadastre, it should show that it's a flat or potentially a family house if you live somewhere in a house. But other than that, most of the other things will not be, you will not be able to use them for any official purposes like your visa application, residence permit, Ministry of the Interior, whatever. So you need to make sure that the flat is actually a flat. One thing, and very important. I mean, it's very difficult to change that when you already move into the apartment. If you don't check this, you move into the apartment, then you get a lease agreement, you go to the Ministry of the Interior, and they'll tell you, yeah, but this is not a flat, you cannot live there. And then what you do? Probably you will not move to some other place because you've just moved, you've paid the commission to the real estate agent, you've paid the deposit, everything, you moved in, and you officially don't have a place to live. So that sucks, and that happens. I've been also contacted by someone who was exactly in this situation, that they already went to the Ministry of the Interior and they refused to change the address because the flat wasn't a flat. Yeah, so that's very, very important. Number two, which you can also find out in the land register, in the cadastre, is who is the owner of the apartment. That's connected to number three, who signed the lease agreement or any proof of accommodation. But this is also important from other perspectives as well. Because when you go to the cadastre, you can see you can find the particular apartment or the land or whatever, everything which is included in the cadastre or in the land register, and you can find out who is the owner. And you should always do that, because that can also tell you other things, like, for example, how much of other documentation you will need to get before you can use the documents officially. Because let's say there are like 4 main potential owners. One would be private landlord. It can be a man, it can be a woman, it can be a married couple, it can be 5 different people, but the point is they're all private. In this case, this is super simple. If there are more owners, even if one of them signs your proof of accommodation or the lease agreement, that's completely fine, and that will very likely work for the Ministry of the Interior. So this is the easiest situation. A bit more complicated, but potentially still easy, can be if the flat is owned by a company. Because if the flat is owned by a company, which happens also for various different reasons, usually tax reasons, but there might be others. If you deal with the director of the company, so he's technically your landlord, or in real life he's your landlord, but technically it's the company, then it's usually easy as well, because if you speak directly with the director or the official representative of the company, that's fine. They just need to sign it themselves, and that's it. So that can potentially still be pretty straightforward. Then, of course, it depends how many directors are there and if they can act independently or if they need to sign everything together. It can get complicated, but in theory, it's still pretty kind of straightforward. Number 3, I did a short video about that, is the družstvo, the housing cooperative. That, in a way, works as the company, because the housing cooperative is the owner. But the problem is that, as I mentioned before, usually if the owner is a company and you deal directly with the director of the company, then it's kind of straightforward, because it's a company, director, everything's clear. But with the družstvo, it works a bit differently, because the director of the družstvo does not necessarily need to be your landlord. Because družstvo, the housing cooperative, basically works the way that the landlords, the owners, let's say, the one who you will be most likely signing a lease agreement with, are not the owners. They're basically just renting the flat from the družstvo, and after some years, they will be able to buy it cheaply. That's the whole kind of concept. So, although the person you will be most likely dealing with will act as an owner, they're really not the owners, and you will need to get all the documents signed by the directors of the housing cooperative, or you will need some additional documentation from the landlord. So I would be careful there. It's still doable, but depends on the conditions of the družstvo, of the housing cooperative. Because in some cases, the director is like very nice, let's say, and they will sign whatever you need, and they're fast, all that. In some cases, not that much. So družstvo, I've done other videos on that topic. And then, watch out. You can also rent an apartment which is owned by a city or the state or the government, whatever. So like it's a public, let's say, apartment. And in most cases, as a foreigner, you cannot live there. Because that's a very specific type of ownership, and also renting it out usually has very specific rules. Like you need to be a Czech citizen, and you need to be, there might be some other conditions depending on who owns it exactly. But the point is, very likely you will not be able to use a flat which is owned by a city or by the Czech Republic generally for any official purposes. So I would be super, super careful there. So that was number 2, who is the actual owner, because that can tell you how much the next steps will be complicated. Jan Novotný, ano, umím česky, jsem Čech, takže docela mi čeština jde, myslím. Okay, let's continue, because the third point, which you should always check, is who actually signed the lease agreement or the proof of accommodation or whatever, or who will actually do it. And that might or might not be related to who is the owner. Because ideally, all the documents you'll be signing should be signed by the owner. So if it's a private person, signed by the private person. If it's a company, then director of the company. If it's družstvo, then by the director of the družstvo. If it's state, yeah, then no one signs it. The president will not sign your lease agreement, probably. Yeah, but it's not always like that, because there can be, for example, some middlemen who will be like dealing with you, and you will not be speaking with the owner. Or that can be management companies or management companies. I will not name any, but I'm sure you've heard some of the names. And it does not necessarily mean that if there is a management company taking care of the apartment, it's a scam or something. It might be, but not necessarily. But what it means is that you will need to get sometimes significantly more paperwork. Because if your lease agreement is not signed directly by the owner of the property, you still need to prove the connection to the owner of the property. So sometimes it can be as simple as having one power of attorney from the landlord. I had it, I think, in one of the apartments we were renting back in the day, that the owner didn't live in the Czech Republic or didn't want to deal with it or whatever. So he gave a power of attorney to her daughter, and the daughter was dealing with us, and we had the power of attorney. So it was all kind of straightforward. But it can be more complicated because, for example, one of these management companies, we've dealt with them too many times because I wanted to say for some reason, a lot of foreigners go with them, but the reason is clear, because they usually have cheaper apartments. So yeah, that's the reason, I think. So we've seen this many times with our clients, and unfortunately it can get pretty tricky because there is the management company, and the management company has a lease agreement with the owner, and then you have a sublease agreement with the management company. That could still be straightforward, but in this particular case, or with this particular company, that gets so complicated because, for example, the lease agreement was not signed by the director of the company, but the director of the company gave a power of attorney to someone to sign the lease agreement on behalf of the company. But then your sublease agreement is signed by someone else, not the director. So there is another person. So there were always like 5 different powers of attorney, and there was the lease agreement, which they didn't want to show you because you would know how much they pay to the landlord and how much you pay them. So it was always a fight to get the documents from them. And in some cases, it took like weeks to even like get it ready. So if you need these documents for your application for a visa or extension or residence permit, whatever, and you have to wait like 6 weeks for getting all the documentation ready, that's not the best. So these are the most important things you should always check in the lease agreement. There are others concerning the actual lease agreement, and if the lease agreement is legal, all that, let me know in the comments if you want me to make another video about this, like what exactly the contents of the lease agreement should be or should not be, and I'll do that. But these are the crucial things, like if the flat is really a flat, who is the owner, and if the owner will be signing the lease agreement or the proof of accommodation or not, and if not, who will be doing it, and if they can provide all the documents leading to the actual owner. And if you remember one thing from this video, or if you share one thing from this video with your friends or relatives or whoever, please let it be, always have a lease agreement. I cannot stretch it. I cannot emphasize it. I don't know. I cannot like say this more and more times, or I cannot say this enough time. I don't know. Like I don't know what's the correct word. But if you don't have a lease agreement, you don't have any rights, and you are just waiting for trouble. Because again, if the landlord does not want to give you a lease agreement, that's fucking shady. Pardon my French, but it was very naturally come in, because that's just shady. Why they don't want to give you a lease agreement? Because they don't want to pay taxes, or because it's like some shady arrangement with the owner. Maybe they're not the owners, or they just like straight up plan something against you. Either way, you're not in a good position. And if you don't have a lease agreement, even if you go hire a lawyer after they kicked you out, kept your deposit, and kept all your things which you left in the apartment, what will the lawyer do? Like the first thing they will do is ask you, okay, where is your lease agreement? Let me see it. Yeah, I don't have a lease agreement. Okay, so you were at least paying the rent to the landlord's account, right? He always collected cash from me. Man, unfortunately, we cannot do anything for you in this case. So if one thing you remember, let it be, always have a lease agreement. If you have it, then always make sure you check if the flat is a flat, who is the owner and who will be signing the lease agreement. And if it's the owner, if not, what's the connection to the owner? That's it from me, guys. Thank you very much. If you found this useful, please share it, comment, like, subscribe, because I do these live streams twice a week. Plus, I every day basically post a short about different topics: immigration or real estate or health insurance or trade license, everything related to foreigners in the Czech Republic. And yeah, I will see you again Thursday, Monday, Thursday, Monday, until the end of the world. Bye-bye, guys. Good night.